What's up, guys? Thank you so much for being here. This is my first ever deep dive, and we're going to go pretty deep. Deep down the Tylenol rabbit hole. So if you like medical truths and the fact that science is ever evolving, if you like empowering health, I highly suggest you hit subscribe. Please support the channel, hit like, share, comment, do all of those awesome things. Get this information out to whomever you think might benefit from it. And thank you for doing so. I also thank you for leaving respectful comments if you disagree with anything I have to say here. Having hard conversations is the best way to make change. Definitely not yelling at each other. That's not going to do anything. That just keeps us in low vibe anger, and that's not good for us, for the planet, for anybody. This is all for entertainment purposes only. I am not a medical professional, nor am I giving medical advice. I am simply sharing my opinion based on research of peer-reviewed journals and government resources and that similar caliber of information. Before we jump to associations with neurodevelopmental disorders, or NDDs, it's helpful just to review what acetaminophen is and how it behaves in the body, and what mechanistic possibilities exist for all of this. So acetaminophen, or paracetamol, which is what it's called outside of the United States, was branded as Tylenol in the 1950s. It's been around since the late 1800s, but wasn't widely used, from what I've come to understand, until it was branded in the 1950s and became an over-the-counter medication. Now, it's long been considered the safe choice for pain and fever during pregnancy. Doctors often recommend it over ibuprofen and aspirin because there have been clearer risks identified for things like miscarriage and bleeding. Over the last decade, however, researchers have been looking more closely at what happens with Tylenol when it's used in pregnancy, especially regarding the developing fetal brain. And there's something that happens, especially during weeks 3 through 8 in the first trimester, where the fetal tubes, the neural tubes, are being developed. And if a woman has a maternal fever, especially if it's 102 degrees or higher, that seems to be the general marker, there is a dramatically increased risk of neural tube development and other neurological malformations. So that is important to know. Maternal fever is dangerous for fetal development. In those instances, it's good to take steps to reduce a fever. However, Tylenol is not your only go-to. There's plenty of other things you can do, like cold compresses, lukewarm baths. There's tons of things that you can do outside of taking this one thing that you're told is the go-to for fever reduction. And besides, fever is our body's natural defense mechanism, so it helps slow down pathogens and enhance immune function, and it's really not a good idea to reduce a fever if it's a mild one and you're not having one that's sustained over a long period of time. If you are experiencing fever of 102 or more, obviously call your doctor, do what they, take their advice with a grain of salt. Now, one thing that we're told as pregnant women to take is folate or folic acid more often. I have seen more language being used in the last few years about folate specifically, and I'm very grateful for that because a lot of us don't process things the way that we're supposed to. Folic acid can actually do more harm than good during that first trimester, that neural tube development stage. So especially if somebody has an MTHFR variant, such as myself, it makes it really difficult when you're exposed to heavy metals and toxins at high levels, especially. Your body has slower detox capability, lower antioxidant defense. It produces less glutathione, which is the body's master antioxidant and detoxifier, and it's in the liver. And guess what depletes glutathione? Tylenol! So you have, especially with this MTHFR variant, more toxic accumulation in tissues like your brain, your liver, your kidneys, which leads to higher inflammation and oxidative stress and greater risk for long-term health issues. Heavy metals like mercury, lead, arsenic, aluminum, and environmental toxins such as pesticides, glyphosate, for example. You have mold microtoxins, plastics. Those can cross the placenta easily. Now, if mom's not able to clear their detox pathways as easily, more toxins are accumulating in maternal blood, which then leads to greater fetal exposure. And then oxidative stress rises, which damages the fetal brain development, especially during that neural tube development and early brain wiring. So when you take Tylenol on top of having issues to begin with, and even sometimes when you don't, if you're just depleted of glutathione in the first place, perhaps you're taking a different kind of medication or not getting enough folate in your diet, there's different things that can really impact all of that. And your liver is processing the acetaminophen, and one of the byproducts of acetaminophen is NAPQI, which is toxic. So normally the liver uses glutathione to neutralize that NAPQI, but if you have less methylation to support glutathione recycling, you have heavy metals in your system which further drain glutathione reserves, and then you take Tylenol, which directly depletes the glutathione, leaving the liver and fetal tissues more vulnerable. It can really impact the fetal brain. Now, when we think about Tylenol in infants and the blood-brain barrier, that adds a whole new layer to all of this. So animal and human studies show that acetaminophen crosses not only the placenta, but also the blood-brain barrier. Now, this is a highly selective, semi-permeable border of endothelial cells that regulates the transfer of solutes and chemicals between the circulatory system and the central nervous system. It basically protects the brain from harmful and unwanted substances in the blood. Well, babies and infants metabolize medications differently, which could mean greater vulnerability. And some research suggests that acetaminophen may impact brain development by interfering with glutathione and the inflammatory responses in the brain. Now, factor in that MTHFR variant again. If you have reduced methylation and glutathione, heavy metal exposure leading to more oxidative stress and toxic buildup, and then you had in Tylenol use, which again depletes glutathione, puts strain on the liver, you're compounding your risk for fetal brain development, detoxification ability, and long-term health. It just makes sense, guys. Like, this is what doing your research means. It's not reading a freaking article on Newsweek and saying that you know everything. It's not listening to some TikTok doctor who is paid to say this kind of stuff. It's doing the research for yourself. And that leads me to the most aggravating part of all of this. Financial incentives and influence loops. Now, this is really where it gets murky. So just like with vaccines, which if you look at my channel, you can tell I talk a lot about them. I'm vaccine injured myself. So is my mom. I have many friends who have watched their children regress, being a happy, healthy baby to getting their shots and becoming severely autistic. But we'll save that for another time. Just like with vaccines, though, there are financial incentives at play that shape how research gets funded, how guidelines are written, and how the public perceives safety. Kenvue is the current owner of Tylenol, and they are a spin-off of Johnson & Johnson, which if you are familiar at all, you know that they're full up on lawsuits, all kinds of stuff. They're just pumping poisons out into the world. And when you look at the institutional investors in Kenvue and Johnson & Johnson, you get some pretty familiar names. I bet you can't guess who they are. Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. Yeah. They're the top shareholders, and they hold stakes in pharma and healthcare companies that influence regulators. So then you have lobbyists that are paid by companies to push policymakers and regulators, such as the FDA, the HHS, and CDC. And then you have medical associations who issue guidelines, like the World Health Organization, for example, and those guidelines directly affect whether pregnant women are told Tylenol is safe. And then you have the researchers who may or may not receive funding from public institutions such as the NIH or Swedish registries, or in some cases have industry ties. Now, on top of all of that, there's a disclosure problem. So even when studies look clean, conflicts of interest often go undisclosed. So reviews of medical literature show that 20 to 60% of industry ties or payments go unreported in publications. A 2016 review found that 43 to 69% of studied failed to fully disclose conflicts of interest. 69%. So cross-checks with U.S. Open Payments database shows that many researchers received money from industry and it wasn't disclosed in their published work. So, this means that even when you read no conflict of interest in a paper, it doesn't mean no industry ties. It just means no disclosed ties. So, why does this matter? Pregnant women are often in pain or have fevers. They're told Tylenol is the only safe choice. If future research confirms even a small risk of harm, the public health implications are massive because Tylenol is used so widely. Now, at the same time, regulators are in a tough spot because if they change the label, they risk causing panic and lawsuits. And if they don't, they risk ignoring early warning signs. Early warning signs, my butt. So there you go. This is what all ties in to the big madness that we are seeing everybody screaming about. You have not nothing is one size fits all. Nothing. People can take penicillin and have a reaction. And if that person tells their doctor, I took penicillin and I had a reaction, the doctor is immediately going to put that on their chart and say, okay, they're allergic to penicillin. But that doesn't happen with this kind of stuff. It doesn't happen with these widespread over-the-counter medications like Tylenol or with vaccines because it's such a big, booming industry. Because there are so many players at play profiting off of us. So, please do your own research. Again, this is for entertainment purposes only, not giving medical advice. I am not a medical professional, but I see through it all. I see through it all, and I hope you do too. I thank you so much for being here. Thanks for hitting like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Have a good one, guys. Love you. Talk to you later.